Hello, welcome back. Today I'm gonna talk a little bit more about Glimmer components. I started a couple of videos last year. I just want to continue with that topic. Glimmer components, mainly Ember Octane, and today we'll talk about handling events or like on click or on submit in forms. In Ember, they're called actions. And yeah, so let me just give you a quick example of what that looks like. I'll go through a few different ways of how you can do this. Okay, I have a new app here. I've started it. This is the default browser view. You get this welcome page. I'm going to create a new, so we don't need to create technically we don't need a component. Let's still create a component though for our example here. So let's see here. So ember-g component, and what should we call this component? Let's see. Why don't we call it let's just call it my form, and we can do something interesting there. And with the new version of Ember, by default you get a template, but you don't get a JS file. That's because you can do a lot of things in the template. And we'll start there. So after I show you just a bit with the template only, we can also do we can add some JavaScript and jump in there as well. So let me first render let me remove this welcome and render our form here. So this has no HTML in it, so it's going to render nothing. So we'll have a white page here. Yeah, so the interesting thing with Ember and the new Glimmer components is that really basic components can just have HTML and nothing else. This is a superpower, I think, and one of the reasons that, or one of the ways that having a separate file for the DOM, for the UI, really shines in Ember as compared to React and a lot of other frameworks too, just because it gets pretty messy and it's hard for designers, hard for beginners to get started when everything's grouped together. So yeah, let's so I'm just gonna do a quick example. So let's do, since this is a form, we'll write a form. And let's see here, so form, and I will actually just remove this yield for now. We don't need to use that. And I'll go over that in a different video in the future. So, and we'll add a button here. We'll call it submit, just being, so let me save that. Here you get some nice linting built into Ember. It says all buttons must have a valid type attribute. So in our case, this is a submit type. So this is a form. So that there goes the linting rule or error is gone. Warning, I guess you could say. And so now I hit submit. As you can see, the page actually refreshes because it's a regular form. But so actually, so let me just backtrack here a little bit. I'm going to, just because I'm doing a form, it's a little more involved. Let me save that. I'll have a button here. We'll do type button, and we'll just call this click for now. So this is one way to I'm just going to show a really basic way to create a click event. So in Ember, you have something called modifiers, and one of the built-in ones is called the on modifier. So you put, and modifiers work on DOM elements. So here we're creating a click handler pretty much, and we'll do we'll call this on click. And if you remember from the previous video, the @ sign means that it's coming from the outside, so that's data passed into our component. So when we click this button, this will fire here. So let me actually just remove that. I'll save it. That's there. If we click this right now, nothing's going to happen. And if I open the dev tools here, let me just shrink this down. Let me actually just put that to the bottom here. You'll see that there's actually an error. So it says you passed the function as a second argument to the on modifier, you passed undefined. And yeah, so I mean, that's actually, this error is not very useful. So in this case, we rendered our form, we didn't pass anything. So we defined on click here. So we should pass on click here to our component. And I'm going to, so the reason I'm doing it this way, I'll explain in a bit, but what I can do here is do something called use a helper called the mut helper. So it's for mutation, MUT. So I'll actually use two different helpers here. So action and then mut, and then this takes a like a value, and so we'll call it test, and that's closed, and then the action helper takes another value, which is what we want to change it to. So let me see. We'll just do clicked. So basically, we're setting test to the value of clicked here. Just close this. And so right now, this is here you'll see a linting error that says do not use action. Instead, use the on modifier and the function helper. So this is the old way of doing this. Instead of doing this, we can replace action with the function helper, fn. So basically what the function helper is doing is applying this argument to this. That's its only role, really. Whereas the action helper before had a lot of different roles. So the reason I wanted to show that is because you'll see the action helper in a lot of projects still, just because people are still transitioning. So it's good to be aware of. So basically this is a way to define a property if it's not already there, and then set that property once this click happens. So let me save that, and let me actually do this test. Just render that there, and we'll do a break here just so it's easier to see. So let me here, we don't need. So if I click this, then clicked appears. Because so our form toggles this once I do a click. So that's great. Mut isn't the greatest syntax to use. I think it's probably eventually going to go away in Ember, probably deprecated. There is a good add-on out there called ember-simple-set-helper, which I've been using. Let's install that right now. So far we haven't done any JavaScript, and this is all been in the template. One thing I wanted to mention, the reason I did this part here inside of this application template is because the application template has a backend context. So Ember creates a controller behind the scenes and assigns that to the value this. But in this component, there is no backend context because we haven't created that myform.js file yet. And that saves on performance, so we don't have to create that when we render our component. And so I cannot use this, so that's why I didn't create that example inside this component here. There are ways around it. So if you wanted to do something like so there's a hash helper, which is basically creates an object, and so maybe we can have clicked inside that and set it to null, and so here, if I move all of this into here and just change these curlies to parentheses, and use value.test or value. So we rename that to test, sorry. And we can render value.test there. Then let me remove this and remove this. So save that. And we do click, we get the same result. So here basically we created an object that basically has its own value on it, because there's no backend context here. So that's one way to get around that. If you don't want to create that JavaScript file for simple state like this, and that's fine. So yeah, so it looks like I installed that helper. Let me just show you how that works. I'll restart the server. Give that a second. So instead of the mut helper here, we'll use set, which lets us lets us not have to use the function helper as well. So set value.test to clicked, and let me save that. It's gonna refresh. It still works the same way. Let me here, let's view the source. Command P, my form. It's actually, so behind the scenes you get a JavaScript file, but as you can see here, this is our code compiled down here. And if you can scroll through here, looks like we have, so you can't really, so we do have set right there. So that's great. And as you can see, it says a template only component. So that's how that works behind the scenes there. Let me just close that. And okay, so that's a simple example of an action handler, and that's setting a value directly. And sometimes that's great because that's all you need to do. You just need to set a value, and then something else reacts to that, like some DOM down here. But usually you do want a JavaScript class to handle some of that stuff for you. So let's create that class for it here. Just looking for that command. I think I was on this side actually. So ember-g, we'll just copy that. Still not used to that new command yet. I think there's actually a way to create them both in one go. But I mean, you could just create them in the components folder here. So if you notice, here's our class. And the linting will help us once again. It says do not create empty backend classes for Glimmer components. And it's saying that because of the performance reasons. So that means just if you have an empty one, just delete it. But we're not going to have an empty one. So let's import action, and we'll define a handler here in the class. It's action, that looks good, and action. On click, and we'll just do alert. Something really simple, right? Save that. And I can replace this whole area here. And let me just remove this top value and all that. And I'll pass this dot on click here. So now that we have a class, we can actually use the disk context there. So save that, hit the button, we'll get an alert box. And what action does is basically it binds this method to this component. So if you pass that down, so you pass this dot on click down to a different component as arguments, it could still work and call the right method in the right context. So that's that. And let's see. Yeah, let's do the form example again. Let's go back to the form example. So I'll call that unsubmit. Erase that, go back here, and just erase that too. So we have our form with just a button. We don't need any inputs, just an example. And so we can do the same thing on modifier, so on submit in our case, and then this dot on submit. So that's that, and it's giving us an error because this isn't saved. And then this will get an event here, and let's do alert submitted, right? So what happens now, you'll see what happens. If I click this, the alert comes up, then our page refreshes. So this is like a normal submit event. So you have to do event prevent default. So that'll stop it from submitting the page as a normal form action it does on a non-SPA page. So if I do that, no refreshing of page. So I mean that's the basic way you use the on modifier. We can also use something like the function helper, and then the set helper from the simple set helper add-on, which is really useful in our case. I also wanted to show this function helper one more time. So let's use that here, and we'll pass hello, right? Like a greeting or something. So basically what I'm saying is fire submit, but also add this argument to it. So if I save that, what do you think is going to happen here? So we should get that argument, right? So greeting, and we'll just put that here. Actually, I don't think that works that way. If I hit submitted hello, and it doesn't refresh. So any additional arguments come after. So in our case, we did hello, and then this adds the value from the actual event onto that. So like that's kind of the ordering there. So you still get the event. So that's that in a nutshell. So we went over the MUT helper, the FN helper, the action helper, which generally you don't want to use anymore, and the simple set helper, which is just set, which is instead of the MUT helper, and also the on modifier. So modifiers work on elements. So that's the difference between a modifier and a helper. So that's really it for this video. Let me know if this was useful. Hope you have a great day, great evening, whatever time it is where you are.